Hello everybody and welcome back for another episode. In last week's episode we were talking about what makes a perfect book. I outlined 13 characteristics that I believe make a book perfect. And today I want to talk about a book that I feel like fits all 13 of these characteristics, and that is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So I'm going to go one by one over the 13 characteristics. So the first trait we talked about was a title, A Christmas Carol. To be honest, it's a little bit generic to me. I still don't completely understand it. I thought Dickens could have been a little bit more creative with that. I think he's just referring to like A Christmas Carol being something that you can sing every year or something that you can read every year, and kind of in the Christmas canon or tradition. Because his point in writing this book was to bring about awareness for many different themes and topics. And he did do a lot to change Christmas and the idea of it and the tradition of it and all those things. Christmas Carol comes in at length at just under 31,000 words. In last week's video I said to me the perfect sweet spot would be like 45 to 50,000. So this is a little bit under. I guess technically this would be considered a novella because it's under 40,000 words. But to me that's not an issue at all because it's so rich of a text that you don't notice. It feels like it's a lot thicker than it is. So the third characteristic we talked about was vivid setting, and Dickens is infamous for this. He's very well known for this in all of his books, just creating such details in the reader's mind that you can picture everything he is writing about. So here's just an example of one of many in this book. The cold became intense. In the main street at the corner of the court, some laborers were repairing the gas pipes and had lighted a great fire in a brazier, around which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. So again, I could spend this whole video talking about all his settings and how vivid they are and his descriptions of them, but I just want to give you examples. So throughout this book, it has to do again and again with the cold and just how wretched and miserable it was for the people that had to experience it, especially in those days. The mood Dickens creates in this. So here's an example of it. It's a very, very somber mood. I'll explain why in just a second. So Marley was dead to begin with is how the book starts out. There's no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it. So whenever the first words are Marley was dead or somebody died, it's obviously going to be pretty brooding, pretty somber, pretty dismal, and it kind of remains that way throughout the book until the end, which has a very, very positive and happy ending. So with that being said, even though the mood is very dark and dismal, there is also comic relief, which goes a long way to break up the kind of the monotony of the darkness. So here's an example of comic relief. At every fresh question that was put to him, this nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter and was so inexpressibly tickled that he was obliged to get up off the sofa and stamp. So this comes towards the middle of the book, probably the second third. It has to do with Scrooge's nephew, who is a very, very, very happy and positive person. He's playing a game it's called Yes and No. You have to guess what he's thinking of. And it turns out to be a little bit of dark humor because they're talking about Scrooge in a little bit of an unfriendly way. But the point is to show that even though Scrooge was miserable and wretched at this time of year, there was people still enjoying themselves. Wit. So I discussed wit last week. A lot of people think of that as just quips and something humorous and really, really just witty, as you would imagine, but it doesn't always have to be that way. So to me, wit is like the flow and how clever our author is with setting the scene and introducing characters. And Dickens does a really good job of this. In the beginning, when he says, this lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let two other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed to him. So this is a great flow because Dickens introduces all these characters. This is an interaction with Scrooge's nephew, and then as soon as Scrooge's nephew leaves, two more gentlemen come in looking for donations. So it really, really introduces characters quickly and seamlessly, and it gives the reader a chance to see the different perspectives of all these characters. So along with the vivid setting, prose is a great feature and a well-known feature of Dickens. So again, this is all over the book, and it goes hand in hand with the setting too. So obviously he uses prose a lot when describing settings. But here's another example of prose. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. So to me, that's just beautiful language, how he ties everything together. That is the final page, I believe, of the book. And a very, very important theme in A Christmas Carol is this idea of nobility obliges. And this was a campaign of Dickens basically saying you're obliged to be noble if you're in the position to do so. So this was a campaign that he wrote about in all of his books, trying to bring awareness to society and to those with the power. And it's all throughout this book. So he's saying that Scrooge is obliged to take care of those kind of beneath him, financially speaking. And it sets around all these people kind of abject, and around this time of year they can't provide and they don't have any money. So Bob Cratchit is a good example of that, but he's happy. And Scrooge is miserly, where he has all this money and he doesn't want to help anybody. So at the beginning of the book, with these donation collectors, he's saying that my taxes should support these people, don't ask me for anything else. Another theme is that it's never too late to change. So Scrooge is very, very old age, but he still is able to change and kind of salvage his life at the end. An important lesson learned from A Christmas Carol to me is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if Scrooge would have been doing the right things all along, like he should have, and it seems like he knew better because he had people like his nephew telling him to do so, but he never listened. He could have prevented all this stuff. So luckily for him, it worked out in the end, but think about how many people along the way he could have helped. A good example of a pocket apothegm, so this kind of saying that you can take with you and carry with you. One of my favorites, or probably my favorite from the book, is it may be that in the sight of heaven, you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. So that's said by the ghost of Christmas Present, when Scrooge is looked down upon people who don't have money like he does and who are poor. And the ghost is saying, who are you to judge people because you have money? These are better people than you. Dickens has a great balance of vocabulary in this. So some of his other books, I think he wanted to keep this a little bit more universally appealing to all audiences. So some of his other books are more challenging with vocabulary. But an example here is the water plug being left in solitude. It's overflowing, suddenly congealed, and turned to misanthropic ice. So misanthropic might be a tough word. To some readers, I really, really like this. And to me, this really shows the genius of Dickens and a creative mind. So it changes the whole meaning of the sentence, just saying, and turn to misanthropic ice, as opposed to turning to just ice, which would be kind of common sense. We know that's what happens to water, but misanthropic gives ice this personification, and it really paints this image in the reader's mind of this ice kind of being evil and having a laugh at the people's expense who are trying to traverse over it. Christmas Carol has been celebrated time and time again. Every year, usually, you can go see it on the play as a play. It's been made into movies. It's always talked about, it seems like. So Scrooge and humbug has become kind of common words to most people, and that is because there are universal truths about human beings and nature and greed. So Scrooge has more than enough to provide, but he just wants more and more. He doesn't want to share with anybody. And it's also a cautionary tale of what can happen if you live like Scrooge. So Dickens was spiritual, saying that our actions in life have meaning after life. So what we do in life is determined in an afterlife. So that was a cautionary tale to say if you're spiritual, you're going to have to pay for your decisions in life. And that was the whole reason why Jacob Marley came to visit as a spirit. He came to visit Scrooge and to warn him. So the 13th and final characteristic of a perfect book is interesting and dichotomous characters. Again, this is a hallmark of Dickens. He's well known for this, creating like this juxtaposition between characters. So Scrooge is kind of the main focus, and then all these other characters come in and interact with him. But we can see just how like obstinate and rigid Scrooge is. So all these other people try to appeal to him, whether it be his nephew, the donation takers, the ghosts that come and visit him. But he's just stuck in his ways. So a good example of this, and a great character description that Dickens says to describe Scrooge is, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. So a great flow and rhythm to that sentence. Hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire. secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. So that description goes on, but again, we have a good rhythm and flow by using the same amount of syllables and same endings on these words, and also some similes. So sharp as flint, solitary as an oyster. So that is it for today's episode. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. Please like and subscribe for more content like this, and we'll see you soon.